Hello, me again. I was looking over my history and I haven't posted a video since August last year, which is a long time, but I've been very busy and been light on the ground in questions worthy of videos, but I've been asked one finally. This one's coming from Steve from 2J's Metalwork. Hi Steve. And he wants to know about manipulating grids, how to create angular grids, offset grids, that kind of thing, right? So we're going to have a quick look at that today. We are going to be using a reference object for the purposes of this, so we have a grid layout we're trying to replicate. I'm going to do another video on how to handle reference objects in the environment as well, so look out for that. I won't repeat anything or too much in this video, so you'll need to go over to there. So let's crack on with it. So the first thing we want to do is set our view to a useful view to help us to import and be able to visualize that reference object, right? And that would ordinarily be a plan view, and I would normally do that by using Control P on the view to switch between 3D and plan, like so. But I'm using the new version here, version 2024, and we have a new UCS control here, and I can use that. Again, that's something I'll link in the description, release notes for that version, so you can go there and have a look. But we can actually click on the axis that we want to view the model from, and it will rotate that view. So there I've clicked on X, and it's showing me the X elevation. Click on the Y, that shows me the Y axis, and then Z will show me the plan view, which is pretty handy. The next thing to do, go to import, find your PDF by navigating to its location and picking it, hit OK, and then pick the insertion point. Now you will notice straight away that is not the right scale. So if we quickly run a dimension across here, we can see that 7.49 meters, 7.49 millimeters is the dimension, but actually it needs to be 3 meters. So what we can do in this scenario is, instead of spending time working out what the scale actually is and then importing that into the reference object, we can cheat. So we can use the reference model scale tool, which is available on Warehouse. Again, I will link that, to automatically scale it up. So if we double click on that to run it, pick the reference object, and then pick 2 ends of a known dimension. So there to there, and then we simply enter the known dimension value. Structures will scale it for me. Okay, so now if I zoom in to the 3 meter dimension and run a horizontal dimension between here and there, you can see that it's accurate to 1/100th of a millimeter. So we'll accept that. We're very happy with that. Obviously, when you're using this in your own environment, you will want to be a lot more accurate with that. And what I mean by that is going through the grids and dimensioning them all to make sure that they're all correct. But as a starting point, that's pretty useful. So I'm looking at this and I can see that I'm going to have 3 grids. Okay. So the first one is this vertical area here, this main bit. So if I start my grid command, so we go to steel, or rather we go to edit and we go to grid. All we've got to do is go to the insertion point here and click on it, right? And that will insert a new grid. The other thing that what I should be doing if I was doing it properly is moving the view. So if I pick there, actually, and let's do it properly. So move that down to there so that the grid aligns at 0, 0, 0. So once we've got that, we can turn off the selection for reference objects so that we no longer can pick it, which is going to help you navigate this environment without selecting the grid, the reference object. And we want to double click that grid, bring that up, and then we can start inputting the values. So we want to go from grid A to I first, so we just start popping those dimensions in here. So we go 0, we've got 3 at 3 meters, and then we've got 2 at 15 meters, 1500 millimeters, excuse me, and then across to I we have 1, 2, 3, 4 at 3 meters. And then in Y this is going to be a bit more, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 at 3 meters, 2 at 1500 millimeters, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's a lot. 13 at 3 meters. Okay, and then we hit modify, and we were 1 short, so that's 14. There. Okay, so then we've got a grid that aligns over there. I'm not addressing the Z values. Obviously, if you've got floor levels, you'll set your Z levels to that. So you'll start at 0 perhaps, and then you will have maybe 3 meters. So maybe you've got 3 floors and you've got 3 at 3 meter spacing. So I don't have that information for the purpose of this demonstration, but that's the simpler of the settings. Okay. The other thing that I need to look at is the labels. So we are going in the Y direction, we're going backwards from 20. So let's put those in. 5, 1. I assume it ends in 1. Yeah, so we've got 0, 1, which is, I should have checked that first. So check those. So let's put those labels on, and I missed, there must be, there's a 14.5, wouldn't you know it. Okay, so I can see where the error is now. So between here and there, we've got a 14.5, and we've got 5 there, 13 there, and then we've got that grid there. Good. Okay. So now we've got those labels, now we just need to go across in the X direction and do the same thing. It's unusual to see I. You normally don't see an I because it can be confused with 1. Same with O. You normally don't have an O in a grid because it can be confused with 0. But anyway, we'll overlook that. So we've got 2 options for the remaining grids. Okay, so we can either take the information that we've got and kind of create another grid, right? So what we can do is we can go into the grid again, and let's load a standard to clear the view. And then we can do exactly what we did before. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 at 3 meters, and then 2 at 1500, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 at 3 meters in that direction, and then we can insert it at that point. Okay. We'll need to address the labels again. I would suggest if you are going down this route that you don't put Y labels in, because when you present the drawings, this line will be continuous and you've already got a label over there, but it's personal preference. I personally wouldn't label it. And in this direction we want to go for J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, and Q1R. There we go, modify that, and we're away. Alright, so we've got that. The alternative to that is that we can stretch the grids, which I'll show you with this third grid. Okay, so we've got an option down here which is select the whole grid, which is what we're doing, right? We've got no controls on there, right? But if we switch it to an individual grid, we can pick on the grid lines, and we've got these handles. Okay, so let me just show you that again. So pick on there. We've got no control over moving those lines, the end handles at the very least. But if we pick on the select grid line, we can grab an individual grid like so, and we've got a handle, right? So we can pick that grid, grab that handle, and we can move that now over to there. Okay, so we can extend that grid. The alternative to that is if we are using this control, we can simply double click on it and we can extend it in the X direction. Let's take a quick dimension for that. So if we want to take that across, we can measure from there to there. get it roughly, so say 15 meters, so let's up that to 17 meters. And then when I hit modify, that's the wrong direction. I thought it might be right above 17 meters, and that will extend them out to the right. Okay, so taking care of that in that way. Okay. So that's how to extend it there. We've got two ways of doing that. We then can focus on these skewed grids. Now again, there's a couple of ways that we can approach that. So I'll show you both ways. But the first thing we need to do is we need to orientate orient, whichever one's correct, whichever one you prefer. We need to set the work plane to suit the angle. Now again, we are using a template here, so we have the rotation set, but if you don't, you'll need to find out what the rotation is. But very simply, if we just nip to our view controls, we go to work plane, and we can use 3 points. Okay, so I'm going to set the work plane by 3 points. So first we pick this origin intersection here, and then we need to set X. And I've got confidence in the fact that structures will snap perpendicularly to the end grid line, giving me that X plane. Okay, if you didn't have that, you could use your point and construction line controls to obviously set a 90 degree point from that intersection, like so. So if we go to edit, we go to points, and we can use along an arc, and we can say we want the angle set to 90 degrees. If I apply that, click from that intersection, and then somewhere along that axis, that's going to create a 90 degree point for me. It always goes anti-clockwise, and I always forget, so I need to express that as a negative angle. So we can click from there to there. That gives us a nice 90 degree point. So we then go back to view, go to work plane using 3 points, go from the intersection to the point, and then pick the third point along the y-axis, and then we've set the work plane. The next thing I need to do is go back to edit, go back to grid, and then insert a new grid at that intersection point, and then we've got our grid inserted. Okay, but the dimensions you'll see are slightly different, so we'll want to wipe out X, and we will go 2 at 6 meters and then 1 at 1100. So 2 at 6 meters, 1100, and then Y, we don't need any Y, so we'll just hit modify. We do want to, in actual fact, so what you can see has happened there is, because I put no Y value in there, we've only got one grid line at the bottom, but we obviously want it to extend up to there. So what we can do here is, what I would normally do is I would take a dimension from that point there to that point there. It's about 10 meters, so if I put 10 meters in there, I'll get a nice grid like that. If you don't want to do it that way, you can obviously use the extension. So I could use the Y extension there and put 12 meters, which will extend those grid lines. And that's how to use the sort of, that's manipulating the grids using the grid tool. The alternative to that is to consider them individual grid lines, right? So if you didn't want to faff about with the work plane or any of that business, it might be quicker for you to sort of consider doing it this way. So let's set the work plane back parallel to the view. What we can use instead is, if we go to edit, we can use the add grid line tool, and all I've really got to do is pick the grid I want to attach it to, and then pick the 2 endpoints for the grid. Don't ever show me that again, and do not expand. And there you go, there you have it, we have the grid line. Okay, so if I double click on that grid line now, I can give it a label, as long as I'm picking individual grids. So pick that one, give it a label of S, like so, hit modify, and then I've got that grid. Right. Once I've got that and leaving the individual grid selection active, I can then just copy it. So I can copy that grid line across. That didn't snap, so let me undo that and let's try it again. So So that's better. And then we can do the same thing over here, intersection there, intersection there. Okay, and then all we need to do is change the grid labels as I did before. So there's a T, there's a U, and a V there. Okay. So that's those grids organized, and now they are, because I used the add tool, they're now part of that grid. So I do want to talk to you about something else which is important to understand as far as grids go, because you may not always have an overlay grid to work with. So I just want to talk about a couple of important things as well. So when we're creating the grid, we are using a coordinate system, and we are setting 0, 0, 0 by default. Okay, so what all that's really doing is it's instructing Tekla Structures to start the grid at the datum of 0, 0, 0. Okay, we do not have to use that. Okay, so if you, and this is a good example of where you might want to use it when we set this second grid. What you might want to do instead, and I'll create the grid further down, is you might want to measure, instead of setting the work plane, or again, I'll say it again, but if you don't have a template to overlay and you do have the drawings, you might want to calculate the offset from grid A to grid J. Okay, so you can see there that it's pretty much 27 meters, and I'm not going to be too accurate because I'm just giving you a demonstration of the capability, but obviously you would be much more specific. So if I wanted to start my grid 27 meters from the origin, all I've got to do is, instead of having 0, start the grid at 27 meters, and then I can have 6 spacings at 3 meters and then 2 at 1500 meters. Okay, and then in the Y plane, leave that as 0, and you can see we've got a ghosted outline there of the grid. And then I can have, 3 at 3 meters, 2 at 1500 meters, 1500 meters, right? So you can see we get a ghosted outline of it, and you can see where it's positioning it. So by virtue of the fact that I don't have a 0 at the beginning, and I'm starting my grid at 27 meters, it's then starting the origin of the grid 27 meters in the X direction. Okay, so when I click 0, it inserts it 27 meters from there. Okay. That's important to understand in terms of the Z direction. So this is a question I had the other day, and this is a common thing, right? Okay, so let's say that we want to create our grid to match a ground floor level or a foundation level, or a notional level that's not 0, 0, 0. Okay, we want to position our model at the right level in our space for whatever reason. So we'd want to create our grids using the same principle there with the offset that I was explaining earlier in the Z plane, so that it's higher up. So I want to create my grid at 10 meters above 0 in the Z plane. Okay, so let's set some of the labels as well. Right, so I set my grid information, and then I click on the insert point. Right, instantly you say, well, where's the grid gone? Now, the important thing to understand here is the grid exists, you just can't see it, okay? Because this 3D view, and this really only applies to 3D views, you can't see it because the level of the 3D view is not set to match, okay? So this 3D view is created at 0. If I go to View, and I go to New View, and hold Shift and click Basic View, and then just leave it as 3D, but I set the coordinate view, the coordinate level for the 3D view at 10 meters and hit create, I can now see that grid. Okay, so that is an important principle to understand, particularly, well, as I said, it's only really with 3D views. And let me show you what I mean. If I create a section view along that origin line, and let's view it in the Y plane, you can see I can see both grids. Okay, so if you create a section view, you can see all of those grids. But for the 3D view, when you're setting your model up, it's important that you have the 3D view level set to match the origin point of the grid. All right. So going back to those grids, there's one sort of final thing about, and I'm not going anywhere near radial grids. You can find those in this option. That's for setting, as it sounds, radial grids. But the functionality is pretty much the same. So one other thing I wanted to talk about with the grids is the direct modification way of modifying them as well. So you can see down here I've got direct modification activated. So if I pick on the grid, when I highlight over the grids, you'll notice that they turn blue, and if I pick on them, they are yellow with dimensions. Okay, what that means is that I can grab that grid line and I can drag and snap it and drop it. Okay, so the accuracy will depend on my zoom level. So you can see that's 50mm increments. If I zoom in further, it's still 50mm. Zoom in even further, it's probably, well, then it changes to 10mm. But if I zoom out, I'm getting 500mm. You get the idea. So I can drag and drop those grids. You'll also notice that I'm getting these little symbols, these little plus symbols as well across the two axes on the left and the bottom. If I click on that, that introduces a new grid. Okay, automatically labels it, but I can obviously pick on the individual grids and rename them as well. But that's another useful way of manipulating your grid layouts as well. And that could save you time if you didn't want to sit there and punch in the coordinates. You can just create a grid and then drag and drop it to suit, and it will snap to the reference object as well. So that's a pretty handy way to do it. So we'll leave it there. 25 minutes is plenty long enough to be talking about grids. If you've got any questions, please do feel free to leave a comment against this video. I do read them all. I might not respond to them all, but I do read them. So if you've got a question or a request for another video or something like that, leave me a comment. Always happy to receive them. As I said, I'm going to be working on another video which talks about reference objects, and I'll get that up as soon as I can. So it just leaves me to say thank you for watching, and yeah, take it easy.